We are happy to be here today to talk about this ongoing project in Lane County. It is in Oregon. One of the biggest cities is Eugene, where the University of Oregon is. So there's lots of good transportation patterns and needs going on there. Today, we are going to be talking about a specific equity analysis we did with StreetLight Data as a part of the regional transportation plan update. And this plan also incorporated a congestion management process and ITS plan. So we need lots of data. We're going to go over that first on our agenda. And then Kelly will talk about how we selected our communities of need for the equity analysis, and then we'll talk about the findings. So as I mentioned, we use several different data sources for this plan. We are using RIDIS, which is a platform that is partnering with ODOT to provide us INRIX travel speeds and travel time information along specific corridors in the Lane County area. We are also working with StreetLight to look at regional origin destination patterns and using the travel demand model to sort of bring it all together and really look at the holistic view of transportation patterns in the county. So for this specific presentation, we will be talking about how we looked at specific communities of interest to figure out how we can best serve them with this plan update.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit first about how we selected the communities to focus on for our equity analysis, and what we really relied on were the communities of concern as identified by the Title VI designation. So in Lane County, or the Title VI designation in general, are communities that have one or more of the following four socioeconomic factors. So minority populations, households in poverty, elderly populations, or people with disabilities. So in the Lane County, the central Lane County region, what they do already, you can go to their website, the Lane County Council of Governments. They are already mapping the Title VI designation, so we worked together with them to try to figure out for this equity analysis, which communities of concern do we want to focus on. The map that we're looking at on this slide indicates where census tracts have higher than average percentages of the population that are communities of concern. So you can see kind of in this southern portion of the region, there's like a lighter green, so that means that there's communities with, or there are three or more communities that have higher than average percentages of communities of concern. So what we wanted to do before looking at the whole region was just do a sample analysis of one part of the city. We decided to look at the eastern portion of the region, East Springfield. So you can see we have kind of a smaller census tract that's south of Main Street. We're going to refer to that as the East Springfield Title VI zone. And then this bigger purple zone is what locals refer to as the Thurston community. So we'll refer to that as the Thurston community or the Thurston neighborhood. And then within this neighborhood, there's a smaller census tract that has a higher percentage of communities of concern. So we're going to kind of look at those three together to try to understand what the travel pattern differences are and how we can address them with this plan. So just getting down into like who is actually living in those census tracts. When you look at the East Springfield zone, which is this little one south of Main Street, there's 51% of the population that's elderly and 30% of the population that is minority. And comparing that to the bigger Thurston neighborhood, where there's 16% elderly and 12.5% minority. And then if we take a look at the littler census tract within the Thurston neighborhood, you'll see 18% elderly, which is somewhat in line with the average of 16% elderly, but there's 24% minority compared to the average of 12.5% minority. So what we looked at was kind of the morning and evening peak hours, just to see if there were any differences in travel patterns. And what we found in the morning is that the general Thurston neighborhood and the smaller Title VI community in the Thurston neighborhood have very similar travel patterns, but the East Springfield Title VI community had a lot more trips taking 40 minutes or more during the morning peak hours. So about 17% of trips are driving longer than 40 minutes in the morning. And then, as you'd expect, that also means that those trips are longer for that East Springfield Title VI zone. So a little over 40% of the trips are longer than 5 miles, and we're also taking into consideration how long those trips are going for too. What we found in the evening peak hours is that there were really similar results. So the Thurston neighborhood, both the general neighborhood and the Title VI community, and East Springfield had very similar trip patterns in terms of longer trips in the evening. And then in terms of distance as well, they were very similar. What we learned is that census tracts with higher percentages of communities concerned, so that East Springfield zone, are taking longer trips, both in terms of distance and time in the morning peak hours, and then the travel patterns in the evening kind of balanced out. So we can start to make assumptions about that. There's a possibility of peak spreading in the community. For example, maybe the trips being taken from the East Springfield zone, they're leaving in the morning and they're coming back at different time of day than like the traditional peak hour, which is 4 to 6 p.m. So that's something we can explore further as we go deeper into the analysis. It also brings up, I think with any equity analysis, once you start getting into it more, you need to keep asking questions to go through to the next step of how we can address the plan. So a question that came up for us is, what do increased travel times and trip distances say about the availability of jobs, services, and retail for certain areas? So we know that there's a higher percentage of elderly living in that East Springfield zone. What does that mean for the number of doctors or grocery stores that are within a smaller distance for them to access? And I also want to highlight how regional knowledge is really useful for this analysis as well. We don't live in Eugene, and so about a month ago, we presented to the Lane County Technical Advisory Committee, and they gave us some really important insights about this region that help us form the next steps of this analysis. For example, there's a grocery store, like an Albertsons, that just went out of business in that East Springfield zone. So that's important to think about as we continue. And they also were able to confirm that they know there's a higher percentage of elderly population that live there. And then ultimately, what we want to do with this analysis is address the disparities that are potentially taking place in the Lane County region. We want to make sure that the plan that we're putting together doesn't put undue burden onto these communities that already have potentially longer trips, both in terms of distance and time in the morning peak hours, and try to understand how we can help them.